Here we are, we're on history again. And what we stopped at was after talking about the different movements and when they ordained women and so on and so forth. So now we come into another problem that we had to deal with in America, namely assimilation and intermarriage. Now, the Torah tells us that the Jewish people will be among the smallest of the nations. And bottom line is, we still are. Okay? The reasons for that are manifold. One is assimilation, that we always were intermingling with the other peoples and intermarrying with those. Yeah, this is not a recent innovation. They were intermarrying in the time of Ezra. They were intermarrying in the time of the prophets. It's really never a time that we weren't intermarrying or assimilating. So, but now it's become a major thing. So much so that, again, the recent Pew study showed us that if you take the Orthodox out of the equation, and you have an intermarriage rate of 72% of intermarriage. So take us out of the equation, you have 72%. With us in the equation, we lower that to 52%. Because the Orthodox, for the most part, are not intermarrying. You have some, but for the most part, it's not intermarriage. And besides that, the Orthodox, for the most part, are having more than 1.6 kids. Okay? So, with all that said and done, we're not doing it. Now, what's the problem in intermarriage? The problem for intermarriage is it's against the Torah. Bottom line. It's against the Torah. It says, you shall not intermarry with them, you shall not give your daughter to his son, and you shall not take his daughter to your son, for he will cause your child to turn away from me, meaning God, and they will worship the God of others. So there is a biblical injunction against intermarriage. So that is not, people always ask why we shouldn't intermarry. The answer should never be not to give Hitler a posthumous victory. That is the worst reason one could give to any person. Okay, that was another problem with intermarriage, because when people in the non-Orthodox world, and the conservative reform, Reconstructionists, and anything else, where we're holding that God did not give us the Torah and it's all man-made, and worse than that, the parents, for the most part, are not being religious, not eating kosher, not leading a Jewish lifestyle. In other words, let's say somebody holds the Torah is not from God, but they follow Jewish law and they're living a Jewish life and they're keeping the holidays, so they could at least say to their children, look, I brought you up better than this, as it were, quote unquote better. You should know better than to destroy the Jewish people. And by intermarrying is part of the destruction of the Jewish people, because the children 9 times out of 10 will not be brought up, assuming they're Jewish because of the mother, will not be brought up as Jewish. They'll be brought up as mixture, make your own choice, no religion, whatever the case is going to be. So that's number one. So if you tell the person, why can't I intermarry? The reason you shouldn't intermarry because Torah says you shouldn't do it. God forbade it, just like God forbade pork, and God forbade other things. God also forbade intermarriage, period. So there's nowhere to go with that. On the other hand, if I say that it was written by man over the centuries, and some men told us you shouldn't intermarry, what do I care? I love her, I love him, I want to be with them the rest of my life, and that's how intermarriage happens. Or I don't care about what the Torah says, period. I mean, I have those choices, okay? But one of the main reasons that we have to say not to intermarry is very simple, because God said so. Your favorite answer, right? God said so. Okay, now that would be one thing. Like I said, anti-Semitism is not such a big factor here. We may have the KKK, we may have other things going on, but for the most part, we get along pretty well with everybody. Like I said, you go to public schools, you go to college, nobody's putting Jewish stars or Nazi stickers on your doors when they know you're Jewish. You can go to UMass Amherst, you can go to Columbia University, I'm sure you can go to IUSB or Bloomington or any other one of the colleges, Harvard, name what, Notre Dame, and they don't care that you're Jewish. They like that they have Jews on campus, as a matter of fact. So I always find. Okay. You all, like I said, but the biggest thing is our birth rate has been decreased a lot because people are having less and less kids. It's not the fashion to have more kids. So all those things added to what's going on, and that's why we had such a problem with, like I said, intermarriage and the lessening and being not having enough kids to refill ourselves. Because normally, what the Torah says, by the way, that you should have patrilineal, be fruitful and multiply, right? So it says you have to have at least 2 children, a boy and a girl. And in order to know you fulfilled your mitzvah, that boy and the girl have to both be married and have children of their own. When they've done that, they both have to have, by the way, a boy and a girl. When they've done that, you fulfilled your mitzvah of patrilineal. Until that point, you have not yet fulfilled your mitzvah of having children.
That's a biblical injunction.
Yes.
A boy and a girl.
Yes. Yes. So you can imagine.
Keep trying.
Keep trying until you get a boy and a girl.
50 kids.
Right. Okay? So you have to have a boy and a girl because you want to carry on the species. Okay? Very good. So, but like I said, it doesn't stop because you have to wait till your grandchildren, till your kids have. You're not finished until you have grandchildren.
Can my kids make up for what I didn't have?
It's an interesting question because some people only have girls, some people only have boys. It's not in our power to determine what we're going to have. It's in God's power. It's only God who can do it. So I have my 5, 6, 20 kids, and they're all boys. Well, I never have to worry about a minion. I have to still deal with I didn't have a girl yet. And so hopefully they'll carry it on. But it's that's like I said, that's all up to God. What we're going to have, boy or girl, that's like everything else, that's all up to God. So if God decides that He wants me to have 5 boys, that's what I'm going to get. If He wants me but the point is that we don't have we're here to populate the world. We're not here to control that sort of a thing. So when I remember people used to ask me, when they would see me with my 3 kids, they would say, so, are you through? So I thought it was a very insulting question anyway. But I said, really, that's up to God. It's not up to me. I have nothing to do with this. Okay? So, but people want to think, because when you have more than 2 kids, what are you doing? It's overpopulation. The planet can't take it. It's not good. And now they tell us, by the way, just for that overpopulation, that with all 7 billion people we have on this planet, we could, if we would build Texas like we do New York and those skyscrapers, we could fit the entire world's population into Texas.
They'll build the entire
Can you imagine that? For all the world's overpopulation and garbage that we hear, we could fit the entire world just in Texas if we would build it like we have New York. If you're gonna have everybody like we have in South Bend, that everybody has a nice piece of land, everything else, okay. So that you're spreading out. But if I make it like with the towers, forget it. I can do what I want. Can you imagine that though? To have 7 billion people just in Texas, and the rest of the world is unoccupied. Okay? Everybody's going to run to Texas now.
Most of the world's landmass is unoccupied.
Right. Right. And for those who don't believe that, just take a plane over Maine. Maine, you'll see that's all wood. So is Canada. Canada has a lot of woodlands. So much woodlands out there. It was amazing. I was flying over, and I was thinking, world overpopulation? Are you crazy? It's impossible. We have so much open land here that we could.
The second largest landmass in the world, Canada.
Yeah, and it's not occupied. So there's a lot of empty place there. A lot of empty place.
And what about Russia?
Russia, okay. Siberia, especially.
Yeah.
Alaska, go ahead. Okay. Now, with all this intermarriage and all this assimilation, there were some responses. You had Hillel responded, and they turned it from B'nai Brit to Hillel. They changed the names. and they went on to Jewish campus life, and they were trying to keep the people in around. They started in 1923, and you also had what would later be called in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and so on and so forth, the Baal Teshuva movement. People were becoming religious who were non-religious, which was something that was also strange, by the way, because normally, however you were raised is how you would stay. Just like a person who was raised as a Democrat would hardly ever become a Republican, or the Republican would hardly ever become a Democrat. So also, if somebody's raised in a conservative reform, a constructionist home, they hardly would ever become Orthodox. They would always remain where they are, right?
Unusual.
So only when things start to happen, namely the 67 war, or the question of authority sort of thing, the draft dodges of Vietnam, the hippies, that generation where there was questioning everything there was, okay, that's when people started to cross over. Why? Because they were looking for something. Remember, I won't change unless I'm looking for something. I only change when I'm looking for something. I'm never going to walk in and say, oh, look at that, they're right, I'm wrong, I should just turn. That never happens. Okay, what happens is because I'm happy with who I am. So when I walk in, I see them having fun. If I'm having fun and they're having fun, we're all having fun. Doesn't matter. But if I'm not comfortable where I am, if I think that something's missing, and thus you have the Madonna who looks for Kabbalah, you have all these Scientologists, what's his name, John Travolta, who went to and as well as the other one from Mission Impossible, who went, I forget his name, who went to Scientology. Why they go? They were Christians. Why they go into the other movements? Because they were missing something. All of them, Lyle Richie, whoever Madonna's with, you have all of you who are missing something, so they had to attach themselves to something more spiritual. Okay, and so when that happens, they find whatever they find. It could be Buddhism. You have a lot of what they call them Jubus, Jews who didn't know, Jewish Buddhists. Yeah. Jews who didn't realize that we have that tradition via Kabbalah, with the meditation, so on and so forth. They didn't realize that, so they went looking for something to the Eastern religions. So you had a lot, that's the point though, when you have all these people looking, suddenly they find these old texts called Talmud, which have this intellectual banter going on, and we have the Kabbalah, where's mysticism, and you have all this going on, and people saying, I never knew we were so rich with all this. Why don't I look at home? Okay, this causes a lot of problems with families, by the way, because I'm talking about Jewish families. When you have a person in a non-religious family that will go religious, it causes a lot of stress in the greater family picture. Because I'm coming from a non-religious home, and suddenly I become religious, which means I can't eat at mommy's house anymore because she's not kosher. So now I have to start figuring out how to make that, how to maneuver through those waters. It's not that difficult if I'm coming from a religious home, become not religious. So what? That doesn't mean anything. I have to deal with all the pressures in my family saying, oh, Nebuch, it's such a pity, my child, he's gone off the way. Fine, all that being put aside, I'm not going to denigrate the problems that they have, but at the same time, they don't have to worry when they're coming home. They can always eat at mom's house. Okay, so it's not that sort of a pressure. It's a different pressure. And again, I won't denigrate those people who have to deal with that pressure, but there's a different pressure as compared to I can't eat at the house. I can eat at the house, but I'm not really interested in being kosher or Jewish anymore. Okay, different pressure, a pressure nonetheless. But you have that sort of
Just a little side note. You did mention Hillel houses, colleges. Are most of them conservative?
From my unofficial thing, I would say most are Reconstructionists.
Oh, really?
Most rabbis in the smaller Hillels, like UMass Amherst, I know, he was a Reconstructionist rabbi at UMaine, University of Maine. It was a Reconstructionist rabbi. Reconstructionist rabbis are for whatever reasons, they seem to be filling the posts more. But you have, certainly in the bigger places, you have Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox. And then I don't know if Reconstruction is. And some places, if the Orthodox are willing to go out there, so you can have an Orthodox guy go out there. But 9 is really not, I won't say 9 times out of 10, but really it's not normal for an Orthodox rabbi to go to a far out Hillel like in Akron, Ohio. Akron, Ohio is not a very strong community. Or at least it wasn't. Maybe it's improved. But at that point, you have to have somebody who's willing to go and not daven with a minion, certainly without a mechitza, and that sort of, he's alone. And if you're going to bring your family, then your family has no structure. It's not like coming to a small town where you're the rabbi, because then you're building something, and you have a stable group. When you come to a Hillel, a college campus, every 4 years you're through with that, and next crop comes in. Now that can work for you, it can work against you. Let's be honest about that. When you have a congregation, they live and die with you. Okay, so you can't get rid of somebody except by the funeral, by the cemetery, or if you're lucky enough for them to move away. Okay, but otherwise you're stuck with that person. When it comes to college, you're never stuck unless you become a graduate student, and even there it's only 8 years. So after 8 years you're through with them. Or less. But I'm saying that's like I said, that's the plus of a college campus. That's the negative is that I can't build anything up. Each time I have to keep rebuilding, and every year it's a new flock, stock, whatever you want to call it. But I have new kids coming in, and I have to grab them every time. So it's very difficult for an Orthodox guy in a small place. Again, if I go into a big place like BU, Boston, Harvard, and the Boston area. If I go to Boston, if I go to New York, the big areas again, then I can have a life, my kids can have a life, and my wife, and so on and so forth. Then you'll find Orthodox possibly on campus. And again, those who go into Hillel or college or campus, what they call campus ministry, it's a whole different outlook too. I have to really be able to deal with all those questions that the college students will bring, as compared to a regular congregant, which 9 times out of 10, I'm not going to be dealing with those sort of questions. So it's a different approach. So I have to know what I want to do. As Reconstructionists, Reform, normally ones who are going to fill that. I don't know about conservative. I don't know if most conservatives want to go into Hillel. That would be interesting. I'm sure they have some, but I don't know if there's that many who want to go.
Like the guy, I keep forgetting his name. He goes to HSC, and he was a Hillel rabbi in Wisconsin, I think.
Romy Clore, right?
Who?
Clore. But he wasn't with Hillel. He was with a different organization.
Oh, I thought he was in Hillel.
No, the Hillel in the Madison, from what I understand, they had 4 or 5 different groups.
Oh.
So it's you have a lot of Jews there.
Yeah, right.
The more Jews you have, the more groups come up. At UMass, we had Rabbi Darren of Chabad, and he was off campus. Off campus meant across the street, meant nothing. But he was very powerful there, as compared to the Reconstructionist rabbi who was running the Hillel.
Reconstructionist. I don't know if I'm using the right words. It's a lower level of religiosity.
I'm not going to say lower level.
Well,
They have a different theological belief in Judaism, and they don't believe that God is all powerful and all knowing and so on and so forth. They certainly don't believe that the Torah was given by God. I'm not sure what they say about the revelation of Sinai. I don't think they believe in the revelation of Sinai. They may, at this point, they may have changed, but I know that Mordecai Kaplan didn't. But they are saying that you should be Jewish because that was the civilization. So you should be kosher because that's what our grandparents said. You should keep Shabbos.
Believes in kosher.
Yeah, they would say you should do it. Nobody, except Reform. Reform say you don't have to do it. They don't push for kosher. Now, what that says doesn't mean they're not kosher. You have some reform people, some reform. I think the rabbi in South Bend, I'm pretty sure he told me he's kosher. I'm not 100% sure, so I won't say his name, but because I don't want to get him in trouble if I'm wrong. But I'm pretty sure he told me he's kosher. So he's rabbi of South Bend Reform. It's only one, so I think that I'm in trouble anyway. Okay. But it's there are those who will be kosher and those who won't. But it's certainly not one of the rules that they have to do. When it comes to reconstructions, while there are no rules, there's no you must be this in order to play in our game in our sandbox. I know that Mordechai Kaplan was saying that we should be practicing Jews.
Do they follow? I guess they don't. But in essence, do they follow the Torah? Do they use it? Is there a Torah in a reconstructionist?
Yeah, no, it's certainly a Torah. They have the same Torah as we do, but
they don't believe.
They don't believe that God gave it. That's not the question.
Well, plus I would assume this assumption. Like all these biblical things that come out of the Torah, they must reject some of them.
Some of them, yeah, of course. Yep. They will reject. But there's, like I said, you have. I don't want to get into that. That's a whole different. It's a whole different subject. Right. So I'm just saying that they would. Their influence in Hillel has been felt. Mm-hmm. Okay, and whoever the rabbi is in Hillel can truly affect the campus. It can make the campus a very strong Jewish identity, or it can make it a very weak Jewish identity, depending on who the rabbi is and what the rabbi's desires are.
It's interesting. There was a very big Hillel house where I went to school, and there was a lot of Jews in Miami, and I never heard of it. They didn't push it at all.
Right. So again, the rabbi can be very powerful or very weak.
Instead of 10 Jewish attorneys, you would assume that they would have gone there and said, "Hey, come to the Hillel."
Right.
They never did.
Right. Okay. Now in '67, you had the famous 6-Day War. That brought a lot of people back to Judaism also. Okay. You had secular Jews found themselves praying for Israel. They wanted to visit. They're giving money to Israel. Never cared about before something because we won with a chance. 67, it was a miracle, open miracle. Who could deny a 6-Day War? Now we deny the 6-Day War. Then they didn't deny it. Like I said, you had the hippie movement, you had the Black Pride movement. A lot of these movements were coming out that they were showing that it's fashionable for Jews to identify with Judaism. Okay? Remember, before this, if you were different, then you would be discriminated against. Here we have people who are sticking up for who they are, so now it's making it easier for us to show who we are. If you go back to the 30s, you would not see an Orthodox Jewish person would not be walking around with a kippah, as we do today.
Even in the 50s.
Even 50s. Yeah. They would walk around with a cap. You'd be very religious with your cap. Okay? That's how they walk around. They had to cover their head. They did that. But they wouldn't walk around openly. That was a vestige of Europe, where we wanted to just blend in. And we're not interested in doing it. We'll do it. We'll keep our halacha. No halacha says I have to wear a Jewish star on top of my kippah or make it different colors or make a Snoopy on it. I don't have to be noticeable. I just have to do what I have to do. So they would go to shul, the Orthodox. They would go to shul, they would keep kosher, they would do what they want. This is where also you got this concept of I can eat fish outside, or I can eat vegetables outside. Because again, they wanted to be able to blend in as well as they could. This before we knew all the stuff that goes on in restaurants. They used to look at a candy bar and make sure there's no pork in there. Again, this is long before we understood what was going on. Once we knew what was really going on in the factories, a lot of that would go by the wayside. But the kippah didn't. You still have today Jews, Orthodox Jews, who do not wear a kippah or in their profession. Because they say, I don't want to get personal. So I'm just saying, you have it because the people will argue it's bad for their profession. People are prejudiced against them, which is true, no question. I'm sure it's true out there. But there's still a lot of prejudice out there. But now I said that is a vestige of the old days. Okay?
I knew a family in Chicago while we were living there. They owned a major hardware and paint store on the north side. And, the father worked there and his sons and so forth. And I just, conversationally, I got to know them pretty good in school. And, ask him, you were on the south side, you wear your yarmulkes? He says, no. He says, we wear our baseball caps.
Right.
That way they can keep their head covered and just...
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, like I said, you also had yeshivas opening up for people who are just coming back to Judaism. You had Or Samech, you had Eshet Torah, you had the Kotel. All this, it was really started by one guy who went to the Kotel, the Wailing Wall. He sees a guy crying at the wall or looking at the wall, doesn't know what the wall is going on, and he says to him, would you like to come for a Shabbos meal? Started that easily. Talking about you're picking on somebody going to in Hillel, coming to the Jewish kids on campus. This is what this rabbi did. He went by the Kotel, I forget his name already. I think it was Rabbi Weinbach, I think it was. The Kotel, it's called the Kotel. The Wailing Wall, the Western Wall. The Kotel is in Hebrew, it's called the Kotel, the wall. So this is what that rabbi would do. It was called, and that's why it's called Yeshiva Kotel, the Yeshiva of the wall. It's also Eshet Torah. It was the whole thing. They all had that concept where I'm going to go and I see a person put on one of these fake kippot,
the little white,
whatever they are, and he's going to go to them and he'd say, "Are you Jewish?" The first question was, "Are you Jewish?" Kid would say, "Yes." "Okay, I would like to have a Shabbos meal." Good. And he would bring him home for Shabbos. He would bring him home for Shabbos, introduce him, and say, "How would I like to come to yeshiva for a day? Let me try for a day. See what Torah is." Okay, that's how it started. Really, is how it started. I go one by one by one by one. Wow. I guess I think his name was. He just died recently. Weinbach.
The founder was Eshet Torah.
Yeah, Weinbach.
Yeah, the last year.
Okay, Weinbach.
Okay. And what year did he start this?
In the 60s. 60s and 70s. It actually had to be after 7 because they're by the wall. So Eshet Torah was one of them. The fire of Torah.
Eshet Torah was yeshiva.
It is yeshiva. It's still there. In Jerusalem. They're all in Jerusalem.
They have branches. They have a big branch in St. Louis.
Yeah, what I'm saying, that's what they did. They would go to these Jews who were coming back, and they would. It was a moment of Jewish pride. So let's come for a Shabbos meal, and anybody by the wall, single, anybody by the wall is gonna. Why not? It's a free meal. Leave me alone. To come. And they were looking for again. Remember what it said? They were looking for something. They were looking for something. Why am I here at this wall? He wouldn't go to everybody. He would go to certain people, and you could identify the people. So that's what he did. He created the yeshivot. It said the other yeshivot came out of that. Everybody wanted to do this. They started to do Hebrew school. Hebrew for dummies. By the way, this very book that we're reading now by Rabbi Ephraim Z. Buchwald, I'll give him the credit he deserves. He began reaching out with Lincoln Square Synagogue in 1973. And that's when he made the newest National Jewish Outreach Program, who sponsored this course. And that was in 1987. So he started working in 1973 in New York City. And then he finally started his own organization in 1987. Yeah, Chabad Lubavitch. Like I say many times, the old saying was, if there's a Coke machine, Lubavitch is close to follow. Okay? Wherever there's one Jew, Lubavitch will go. I don't know how they do it. They have their own fundraisers. They don't have somebody from New York giving money. It's not from the national board that they get it. They go in, they make connections. They're really great people, and they do a good job.
The Bads are basically Orthodox.
They are all Orthodox. So all of them are Orthodox.
You ask somebody that. I know it's off the topic, but there's so many of them. Where do they get their funding from?
They get it from all over. They have to fundraise.
From rich Kabbalists?
No, it's not from. It's from locals. They get it from the locals. The fundraising is local. Every place they go is local. So they get it from somebody.
They don't have national.
No. That was, of course, under the leadership of Rabbi Nachum Mendel Schneerson, who made a whole focus on reaching out to non-observant Jews. So they went out and they did what they did.
This is like a Chabad.
Some people call that, but it's not a Chabad.
Yeah,
We're an adult Hillel, we're an outreach, you call us what you want. We're an educational center, we do everything.
Yeah, but isn't
Chabad meant that they hold by that philosophy of Chabad. Chacham bin Adas. We're not.
They are an outreach center. They walk.
Yeah, but I'm saying they followed the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who was Nifter, who is rest in peace. But they were his students, And so they carried on his message, and they have a whole program. Places like this, we don't follow their program. We do our own program.
Follow the program, but when I thought about moving it on, I looked at Chabad,
right?
They all have basically the same philosophy.
Chabad is all the same.
Yeah,
it's cookie cutter.
We'll welcome everybody.
Right, it's cookie cutter, right?
Don't have to be Orthodox.
Correct. No synagogue, no Orthodox synagogue says you have to be Orthodox. None. That's the fallacy.
They publicize it. Come on.
Again, no Orthodox rabbi.
Okay,
but I'm saying no Orthodox rabbi, no Orthodox shul is going to say no to anybody. When it comes to shorts, we're going to say dress accordingly. Leave me alone.
Well,
but nobody's.
I just use that.
I'm just saying, but with all that, nobody's going to kick anybody. If somebody knows, if you walk into New York, okay, where they have a large Jewish community, and you're going to walk in as not dressed properly, either man or women, nobody's going to make a big deal because they know that you're really not aware of what's going on. On the other hand, if they know somebody is aware of what's going on, they may say to the person, please dress appropriately.
No, because when I saw pictures of Chabad, it's something like in Toronto, there must have been, with such a huge Jewish community, I think I counted 12, 15 Chabads.
Right. Okay, so let's go on.
You see pictures of
right.
it. They weren't wearing shirts.
Yeah.
They weren't regular normal clothes. The people.
Okay, so let's go on. So in '83, one thing that also tore the fabric of the Jewish community apart was when the Reform movement. This is not. How do I say it? But the Reform movement announced that they are allowing for patrilineal descent, which means that if the father is Jewish and the mother is not, that the child therefore is Jewish. There are riders with that, but I want to make something very clear. It didn't happen in 1983. It happened in 1800s. It was made famous. It was made known by Rabbi Schindler, Alexander Schindler, I think his name was. Rest in peace. Yeah. So he was the one who was the leader of the Reform movement in '83, and he announced this whole thing about patrilineal descent. But again, it was already part of the books, and I know that because a Reform rabbi who I was learning with when I was in Boston, so he pointed out that was in the 1800s.
That they had already had that?
Yeah, it was already part of
but very quietly, in other words.
Right, it was quiet. But it wasn't known, and he was angry at Schindler for making it known because he said, what do you make a fight for? We've been doing it, just shut up about it. But he showed it, I think it was in 1890s that they allowed this.
I think maybe Schindler wanted to make a point of it.
Yeah,
prior to the 1950s to 60s, intermarriage wasn't really a big problem amongst any.
Right. So, but like I said, he made that famous. Now, there's one thing where the Reform movement comes out more stringent than the Orthodox. You ready for this? Okay? For us, as Orthodox Jews, we say that if your mother is Jewish, you're Jewish. Period, end. We don't care if you converted to whatever you were, you're Jewish. You want to come back home, you come back home. Drop the other religion, of course, but come back home. You're Jewish. You were Jewish, you are Jewish, you will die Jewish, period. Regardless of what you convert to. And it doesn't matter if you were brought up Jewish. You can be brought up a non-Jew. And once you decide, I want to come back because my mother, and you give proof that your mother's actually Jewish, you're Jewish. That's orthodoxy. Okay? For the Reform, it's not that way. He's attacking you. For the Reform, Jim, it's not that way. For the Reform is, you have to be, while one could follow the father, that's only if you were brought up Jewish. So in other words, if the mother is Jewish for the Reform, but the child is brought up Seventh-day Adventist or whatever, then the child is not Jewish according to Reform. You hear that? So, and this one situation, Reform become more stringent in defining who is a Jew than the Jews, than the Orthodox. Sorry.
Still that way?
Yes. And I know this. I just recently spoke with a Reform rabbi, making sure this is true. And I wanted to make sure I didn't want to say anything that's not true. And that's what and that was the exact language. We're more stringent than the Orthodox in this matter. That you have to be brought up Jewish. If you're not brought up Jewish, then it doesn't matter if you're from a mother or a father who's Jewish. You have to be converted.
Damn.
You heard it right.
Wow.
But if
That's weird.
Now I don't know really how much they're going to push that, but that.
more strict than Orthodox.
But that's a headline. That's a headline. Now, I'm not. I'll tell you another thing. While that's their rule, I don't know how far they would push that.
Yeah,
That I don't know.
So you come from well, not you per se, but I mean you come from a Jewish family, right?
Yes.
And they didn't practice.
No. I was brought. No, I would.
I don't mean.
No. In other words, remember, if somebody goes to Hebrew school, then they feel their obligation.
Just they go.
If I'm brought up as Jewish.
They go to Hebrew school for 1 year and Reform will accept them because.
Yeah. If I was brought up, or if I went to synagogue, if I did anything Jewish, I'm good. But if I was brought up as a Christian or something else, no good.
No. The point I'm getting is that your parents are Jewish, not you per se.
Yes, one's parents are Jewish.
Your parents are Jewish. They did nothing about it. You didn't go to Hebrew school. You didn't go to synagogue. But they told the kid, hey, you're Jewish.
No, then you're Jewish. According to them, you'd be Jewish.
Just by saying.
Again, if you gave money to the UJF.
Just by saying, Mark, you're Jewish.
Right.
But you don't have to go to synagogue. You don't have to go to Hebrew school. You don't have to do zip.
I think they would say yes because you identified. Yes. But if you didn't identify and you were brought up with that's already got me on a shady area. Again, if I was brought up in a different religion.
It's kind of a subjective thing.
No, that's clear. But I'm saying it's interesting they became more strict as a result of that. Okay?
Interesting.
It's actually very fascinating. Okay, so like I said, when they did that though, let's face it, they did cause a rift in 1983. They did cause a gigantic rift in the Jewish communities.
So your parents weren't Jewish, and the kid. I know, it just interests me.
Parents aren't Jewish?
They're not Jewish. They were. They didn't even know what they were. Not me, but
right.
But the kid said, he starts studying like.
He has to convert, according to everybody.
He has to.
If they're not Jewish, they're not Jewish. Nobody's going to argue that. It doesn't matter if the kid's brought up Jewish.
Kid's an orphan, right?
No, he has to become Jewish.
I don't know what I am, but he starts.
So they convert. Converted. What's all opinions? Yeah. Okay. Like I said, that it did cause a problem. On the other hand, while they're doing this, also the Reform movement has, in the last decade or so, become more observant. They're saying to people, we have to get back. And some of the leaders, I think Levy is one of the people, if I remember the name right. I think Eric Levy or something like that. He's coming back and saying we have to start getting back to basics. We have to keep kosher. We have to do certain things because that's what's going to maintain us. Just like I said last week, they have their day schools, something that would have been unheard of normally. Reform. Okay, so that was the American response. Like I said,
so they're starting to approach conservatism.
They're becoming more aware of their need for practices. I don't want, again, it's not a matter of jumping into conservative or anything else. They want to maintain their philosophy.
It's more like Reconstructionism because they're still not going to say that halacha is
Again, well, look, I have to be very clear about this. When we're looking at different groups and different religious philosophies, you can't say that they're going towards one because of the observance level. That's not fair to the movement. You have to say, if those who are Reconstructionists, if they're following their movement, actually, if everybody follows their movement, they're going to be pretty much like me, observant. Okay? Everybody's coming back to it. Now, Rabbi Lindau recently wrote an article in the Bulletin showing how the Reform had become more observant. Okay? And it's their own documentation you're looking at it. You saw it too, right? You got in the Bulletin. So it's showing how they're becoming more aware that we can't just throw away the baby with the bathwater. We have to bring back some of the practices. And that's what's going to maintain the system. Like I said, they're starting their day schools, everything else. They started their day schools a while ago. But everybody's coming to that. But again, it's not fair to say because they're saying we need to take on more observance, that they are abandoning their religious philosophy. They're not. They maintain their religious philosophy, and I think that's very important to understand that. They're not saying God gave the Torah. They're not saying that God's not powerful. They're not saying anything like that. They're saying within our world, where we hold, this is how we're changing. That's all. But we're still maintaining our structure. And like I said, it's really not fair to say they're becoming conservative, Reconstructionists, or Orthodox. Period. Okay? Just remaining where they are, as far as the theology is concerned. Okay. Now, that's South America. Now we come back to the founding of the State of Israel, and we have 10 minutes to do this. Okay. Here we go. In 1947, the United Nations recognized that the British mandate was unmanageable, and so they proposed a partition of the state of Palestine into two states, named the Jewish state and the Arab state. So it's important to note that Palestine at that time of the original mandate, 1920, included what they called Jordan. The British, however, separated that territory and gave it to King Abdullah of the Hashemites. Hashemites, it's interesting. Thus, the territory of Palestine that the United Nations was dividing was only 1/3 of the original territory of Palestine. Can you imagine that? Yes.
This is where I'm a little confused. Maybe you can help me.
Listening.
Because everybody says the UN, basically started Israel in 1948, right?
Yes. Again, we'll start with the British mandate by 1919, but go ahead. 1917.
But 1948, when the UN signed the document.
Yes.
How? So many people say that it was. I'm not saying. I want you to explain this. So many people say it was really Harry Truman that was the impetus behind this. This is where I'm very weak.
Wasn't he the first one of any national
he pushed
leader?
Yeah, there's a famous story.
Made an announcement?
There's a famous story. He really didn't give a damn about it. In fact, some people say it was anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
But he had a Jewish friend that he grew up with.
Yeah.
Right.
Who he called the Shabbos guy.
Okay.
I don't know how true this is. You hear these urban myths.
I read that.
Oh, you read and he went.
We're going to cover it. Let me just. We're going to cover this.
I'm very weak in that.
Okay.
How was he? Does he? Listen.
Let me just get to it.
Because the UN was always really weak. So was he really the impetus behind?
Okay. Let me get to it. Okay. I hear what you're asking. So you said we'll get there in a few minutes, I think. Okay. So according to the UN, according to a proposal, the remaining third was then divided between the two populations. Okay. Now, when this vote took place, this was the vote. 33 votes were in favor of the petition, including the Soviet Union, USSR. Okay, 13 against and 10 abstentions.
And the Soviet Union was for it.
And we're going to find out why. Okay, let me run through this a little. Okay, one of the most important and popular speeches in support was given by the ambassador of the Soviet Union, Andrea Gromko. He said, given the history of the Jewish people and their connection to the land of Israel, given what has happened and the suffering of the Jewish people in Europe, given the aspirations of the Jewish people for thousands of years to live in Israel, the Soviet Union supports the establishment of a Jewish state in Israel.
Wow.
Okay, that's what he said. The question is, why do they do this? Okay, what the
Jews out of Russia.
The Jewish response would be, or the Orthodox response would be, it says in Proverbs that the Leiv Melech Biyad Hashem, the king's heart is in the hand of God. In other words, as Obama, take Obama to be an example. When Obama says whatever he says for or against Israel, it's not Obama who says these things. It's God using him as a puppet. The higher a person gets, the less free will he has. God runs the show. That's what it says in Proverbs. Now, a more secular reason, if you will, is, just remember, the original Jewish Zionists were socialists. Okay? Soviet Union wants to have a piece of the rock. They have oil in the area. Let's get on the Jewish good boy side. Let's support the state of Israel. That's a secular reason. Okay, can you take the religious reason? That God's controlling everybody, or the more secular reason that says, and one we would all hear very much so, it was business, what's best for business. The Soviets figured...
Couldn't it also been, let's get rid of the Jews out of Russia too?
They weren't letting us go.
But if you wanted to go to question.
No, they wouldn't let us go. That's why you had to refuse next. You had to refuse next. They have refuseniks. I mean, we're going to talk about that, but they weren't so willing to let Jews go. They wanted a stronghold in the Middle East.
Because these were the secular Zionists were
socialists. So they figured we'll have a socialist. Why does America want us there? Because we're a democracy. The only democracy in the area. It's not that they love Jews. Okay, let's be honest about it. It's good business. We have an ally in the area. That's all it is.
They're the only ally.
That's all it is. So that's America's response, and that was also the Soviet Union's response. When they found out that we weren't going to work with them, that changed a little bit. Okay, but that was really that was what was going on. So you have now when the petition was presented, the Arabs said no, absolutely not. We don't accept it. The Arabs voted against it. The Jews said, fine, better to have some state rather than none, so we'll work with it. Good. Now, an interesting thing to note is when the Jews accepted the partition plan, there were 600,000 Jews in Israel at that point. Strange that number would be there because when we left we left Egypt the first time, there was when we're leaving from slavery. Man-wise, we know the exact number, 603,550. Again, 600,000. So it's interesting that from that time to this...
Egypt, there were 600,000 men.
Men. We don't know men. People. So here I'm just saying, right. So here I'm just saying the number was interesting, and that you have the same, approximately the same thing, okay? Now, when the United Nations called for the British to depart, in 48, they pulled out, so it became a race between the Jews and the Arabs to claim strategic locations. And unfortunately, in most instances, the British prearranged with the Arabs to hand over to them certain critical high points and fortifications. Okay, so why the British do that? Remember, because the British were having cars, petroleum, oil. Let's make friends with the Arabs. To get the Jews.
You got to be buddies with the Arabs.
Right. Again, it's what's best for business. Always what's best for business. Okay? On 48, when the day that May 14th, 1948, which is the 5th of the the Israeli Independence Day, the day the British left, David Ben-Gurion broadcast a declaration of the creation of the State of Israel. Within minutes, President Harry Truman recognized the new Jewish state. Did he have something to do with it? I have no idea.
Yeah, but he recognized, but it was already signed by the
correct. But that was the point. He was one of the first to say Mazel Tov.
That's basically.
That's what it is. So did he have more than that? I don't know. It's all going to be fables. It's all going to be
that's what I was trying to
right.
say.
So
maybe the United States was an impetus New York. Maybe
it could have been. I don't know. Could have been that somebody that he was a Shabbos goy. It could have been a lot of things. The world works in a crazy way.
Right? About his buddy.
Yeah.
Could have been a lot of ways.
Push it.
Okay.
Okay.
Within hours, 5 Arab countries, Egypt, Lebanon, Transjordan, Syria, Iraq, declared war and launched an attack. Thus, we have Israel's War of Independence. Okay, so you have the state was declared war. It didn't take time.
And the Israelis had 5 points of Czechoslovakia.
The fighting was.
That was it.
Somebody
just sent me a thing on it. And I didn't watch the video. They said they had 5 plants of Czechoslovakia.
So the fighting...
Dropping seltzer bottles on it. That would boom.
There you go. The fighting was frightful. Israel had no established army, no central command, no air force, and no weapons to fight anybody. And they only had They only had people who were coming in from concentration camps, refugees. Some people were there already, displaced camps, and yet they won. It was purely miraculous. From the early stages of the War of Independence, hundreds of thousands of Jews, Arabs fled. Now this is going to be a big problem. Wait, let me.
These 5 countries, they literally, I don't remember if you were, they literally attacked Israel.
Yes.
And there were probably hundreds of thousands of troops.
They should have won. Only God kept it. Only God. There's no way to explain it other than God. Period. I don't care what anyone says. Okay. When it comes to this, though, what we have now, we're dealing with this now in 2014. The Arabs are claiming refugee status, and they want the law of return. That's what the Palestinians want. They want to go back to Israel. Okay, so they want to be let back to their homeland, where they left. They claim that we kicked them out. This is important.
Wait, when you say the Arabs, you're talking about
I'm saying the Palestinians.
All over.
Yeah, anybody who claimed to be Palestinian at that point, pre-48.
So yeah, I've always been
okay. Wait.
About
so let's
you could have been an Arab in Syria, but they want that right of return to go.
No. You got to be living in the area. You got to be living there. It's not like the Irish from Boston saying, "I want to go back to Boston. I want to go back to Ireland." That's not fair. It's all about people who are living there want to go back, and they want their families to go back. Not their families in Czechoslovakia at this point, but they want everybody to go back. If that would happen, they would overrun Israel within seconds, according to just population, and they would take. Let me just finish. You have to hear this. Okay, it's from the early. So this is what happened. Most of the people fled, by the way, because the Arab armies told them to get out of the war zone. The Arabs said, "Get out." The Arab propaganda said over and over on the radio that there would be a massacre of the Jews, the proportions of which had not been seen since the Crusades. And afterwards, the Arabs would be able to come back and pick their houses from the Jewish settlements. Many Arabs believed the victory was imminent. If I have 5 nations attacking this nothing crowd, I should be able to beat them. So get out of the way and let us do our job. That's what they were saying. At the same time, Arab politicians also spread rumors about Jews massacring, raping, torturing Arabs. And since Arab armies would do things like that, the Arabs had no problem believing the Jews would do that. Any army, okay? So as a result, the Arabs left Israel for the safety of Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, and everybody else. Let me just finish. While there were a few instances of violence against Arab civilians on the part of the Israeli soldiers, okay, but they were far and few between. But in fact, the new Jewish state urged the Arabs to remain and to live in peace with them in democracy that they were trying to establish. Even after the war, the state of Israel initially opened its arms to Arabs who wished to return to their former homes. So they were given the opportunity, historically. They said no, of course, because they wanted to remain as refugees. They were told by their people remain as refugees because it can be a thorn in the sides of the new Jewish state, which it is. Okay. When it came to Gaza, where they were for many years, that's the West Bank. Okay. So the Israelis said, let us go in and build the hotels.
In Gaza?
Yeah, let us build hotels. We'll build you a nice house. Yeah, we'll build everything.
I've seen pictures of Gaza where you think it's Miami Beach.
Well, that's true too. But they were saying that we'll build everything. And they were told by the Arabs, no, we're not letting you go in. No. Okay, so even though the Israeli plan was to build up and give them a good home, at one point, they were always refused. Now, the pictures you saw of the Gaza, which
looks like
Miami Beach, that's what they never want us to see. What they want us to see is the blown up areas. Okay, that's something else. That's the news media.
Yeah, right.
The news media.
But you think those pictures are valid?
Yes.
The Miami Beach.
Yes, I do.
It still
boggles
my mind. There were hundreds of thousands of people from these 5 countries. How could they have not overrun Israel? Again, that's. I know you can't.
There's only God. No, the answer is only God. God protected us as He did, continues to do. we should be. They should easily be able to wipe us off. No question about it. But because God says no, it's the end of it.